Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Excellent Decisions podcast. This is Robert MacPhee, and my guests and I are here to help you make more excellent decisions, decisions based on your vision, your values, and your value, rather than all the stress and pressure that we're faced with in the world. And this episode is actually part of what I've been calling the Wisdom series, where I've been doing a daily episode. And the reason for that is because that stress and pressure that I've been talking about in today's world right now, as we record this, has been ramped up significantly. And I was noticing that I was feeling actually pretty well equipped to handle all that stress and pressure. And a lot of that is because of the amazing people that I get to hang out with and learn from, who get to be my teachers and my mentors. And I thought one of the things I could do to give back and support other people is to share some of that wisdom with you. So that's why we're here. And today I am thrilled to have Diane Johnson, Dr. Diane Johnson, who has joined us. Diane and I first connected through the Conscious Capitalism Bay Area group, and I am thrilled to have her here. I will not read her bio because it would take the entire time that we have allocated for the episode, but I'm going to give you a couple of highlights. Diane is a CEO and founder of a national consulting firm committed to aligning mission, vision, and values for impact investors, social enterprises, philanthropic institutions, the social sector, purpose-driven businesses, tech companies, and innovative industry leaders. Since 1992, she has consulted, facilitated, and trained on a myriad of topics, including strategic development, cultural capacity, diversity, inclusion, and equity, change management, organizational development, institutional capacity building, leadership development, and collaboration. She is not sitting around waiting for things to happen. She has a doctorate in interdisciplinary studies from Tufts University. She holds 2 master's degrees, one in nonprofit management from the New School, and a second from the Pacific School of Religion in Divinity, BS in Communications from the Annenberg School, along with a marketing concentration from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Yeah. So if this doesn't give her qualifications to be on the Wisdom series, I don't know what does. But my favorite part of her bio is the last line. She lives with her failed foster 11-month-old puppy, Jasper, who I got to meet recently, which was super cool, and her 8-year-old domestic short-hair cat, Cleo, who is tired of being chased around all the time. So Diane, yes. Thank you so much for being willing to join me. I do think that last line is awesome, just to keep things in context nowadays, right? There's so much going on. We got to remember what's really important.
Yes, yes. Well, and especially in these times of stay at home, the relationships that we have, whether they be with our pets, whether they be with our children, whether they be, if we're lucky enough to have partners, spouses, even housemates, it's the impact, the positive impact of social relationships, right? Yeah. And when I think about the wisdom in these times, it is so much related to so, that term social capital that we used to use, decades ago, the notion about, there's value and essential value in our relationships. And I think that's what it's boiling down to. And that we are profoundly reconstructing our relationships. Well, yes. And the reconstruction of our relationships is related to a whole realm of different elements and components.
Yeah, right? For sure. Kind of whether we like it or not right now. So
yes. Yeah. Although I think one of the things it's fascinating is that those of us who where our work is around change and is around facilitating change or helping people think about change or enact it, whether it's on an individual level or on a team or group level or on an organizational institutional level, this is how we're being called to really enact all what we know intellectually, right? And how do we embody that change, and how do we do it? Because there's no way that we can anticipate the level of changes that the world is seeing.
Yeah, for sure. So I talked in introducing you, again, skimmed over the work that you're doing, skimmed over the education. You obviously bring a lot of experience to, your point of view. And I'm curious, just, starting with kind of a 30,000 foot kind of broad view, what are you seeing out there? Like, kind of what's your experience of what's happening right now?
Yeah, I think that my perspective is distinct in the sense that I'm a systems person. I'm someone who really sees the forest and the trees, and so I'm always interpreting and analyzing what I'm experiencing and observing, both from what my individual experience is, but what is also happening on a systems level. And one of the things that is, and this is related to all the amount of the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that I do, is that I'm seeing the distinctions of lived experiences for different people.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what is really coming to mind is how stunningly bifurcated and how separate our culture and society is, and especially in the Bay Area. In the sense that that what I'm witnessing and experiencing are folks who are privileged enough to work in particular industries where the physical distancing is in some instances a mild speed bump, right? And especially those who don't have, who are not in families, right? So people whose lives, professional lives and personal lives are relatively uncomplicated. And then I see those individuals who are working in the social sector, so they're working on the front lines, they're working class, they're in the service industry, where their whole lives and their whole world are have blown up, really have just exploded in the differences and the changes and in the risks that they have to encounter.
Right.
And what I'm really seeing, and that is actually stunningly difficult for me and triggering and challenging, and also challenges how do I have an impact and how do I make a difference, is what do we do with individuals who have privilege and who and they what I'm witnessing is a spiritual bypass or a values bypass, where just there it's like, oh, we realize how privileged we are, and and all this, and how COVID-19 is going to teach us in the world how to be completely different, and isn't this wonderful in the changes that it's going to create.
Mm-hmm.
And what I invite people to interrogate, not just to sit with and to reflect on, but to interrogate, is that acknowledgement of privilege and access, I think also not requires us, but it creates an invitation for us to see what are the structures and systems that allow you to be in your privilege. And that my other thing is, if we're going to give gratitude for what's the lemonade out of all this global lemons, I feel like in the same breath or in the next breath, we have to, or it would behoove us to look at what do we want, what responsibilities and accountabilities do we have in being privileged? So it's not enough just to say, oh, I realize I'm really privileged because I have food and a job and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's the first step. But then I want to invite people to have the next steps of, and what is your responsibility out of that privilege, right? Like I think Marion Wright Edelman said, you know, with absolute privilege comes absolute responsibility, right? And responsibility, like if this world, if COVID-19 is going to create this profound opportunity to change what doesn't work about culture and society, then I think we have to look deeply into what's not working.
Yeah, I think I would totally agree. And I think you're absolutely right that people, like, it's perfectly natural for everyone to look inside and say, what am I going to do to survive? What am I going to do to protect myself? We're literally under a threat right now. And it's a global, it's not like anyone's exempt. We're all doing that. But that response called, okay, here's what I've done to make myself safe. I agree with you that a lot of people seem to have missed the fact that not everyone can do that. That option of, oh, I can be so grateful for you know, the opportunity, you know, to take advantage of the good that can come out of this and to make the world a better place and to be able to survive the months that it's probably going to be that, you know, this is going to go on. But there's a blind spot called some people don't have that. And we were talking before we hit record, it's for some people it's days or maybe weeks before life gets really, really difficult and messy, and the uncertainty of whether that check from the government is coming or whatever is not the biggest problem I'm faced with. It's called food right now, kind of thing.
Right. So, or not even people, like, I think so one of the things, you know, I just have to put my dog outside because he's barking and it's driving me crazy. So hold on.
Okay, hold that. I think I can actually pause the recording. So we just restarted the recording, and we just got to meet Jasper, who got mentioned in the introduction. He wanted to make sure everyone got to know him. So go ahead. Now Diane can focus.
Yes. So I think that this is important, and sometimes this is incredibly challenging, because people have different capacities to notice, pay attention, react to those things that are farther and farther and further out from their lives, right? So the fact that I'm a systems person and someone who's constantly thinking about not only what is happening in my individual life, but what is happening in larger systems and structures, I realize that that not everyone has that experience. And I think that, so again, especially in our world of, again, we live in the Bay Area, and we are in professions that are in professional services around working with individuals, working with organizations, working with institutions, often around change management, around what is going to assist in increase the capacity of the work that we do in our organizational entities. And so this capacity to pay attention to what is happening to us individually, as well as what is happening to various levels of the system, I think is critical, because it speaks to when we can do that, when we have that skill and capacity to pay attention to widening, you know, concentric circles, that capacity enables us to actually enact change. Mm-hmm. You know, and not only enact change, but especially in these times, also enables us to figure out what creates resilience, right? Because I think one of the things that is so profoundly terrifying for so many people is that so many things that we took for granted in our day-to-day lives is radically turned inside out and upside down. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so that lack of continuity, that lack of context, that lack of, you know, we understand that quote unquote normal is no longer. And people talk about, well, when we get back to normal, there will not be getting back to normal. There will be creating right. That's the bad news. No such thing as normal anymore. The good news is that, I mean, I shouldn't, I mean, that's kind of glib, but that from my understanding about what is the potential of this, or what is happening, and what might happen with this virus, is that the social interactions that we used to do, it's highly likely that those will change. Right? Like I was talking to an epidemiologist over the weekend who said, well, we still don't know enough about this, but it's conceivable that this could turn into a seasonal affect that we have to deal with. Right? So that's terrifying. So it's not like, oh, once we flatten the curve, then we can go back to, because that, I mean, yeah, that there are just too many. My understanding is that there are too many elements and components around this virus that we don't know. So this notion about, oh, getting back to normal, I think we get to practice being resilient.
Yeah, and I want to come back to this too, because I think as we look ahead, there's so much to talk about the uncertainty that's ahead.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to circle back a little bit, because I think you're opening up a really important conversation that a lot of people are not paying attention to, about how the way this impacts other people is not necessarily the way it impacts me. And I think you have a really unique perspective as far as if someone just missed that, right? If someone was, focused on taking care of their own family and their own self, or whatever it might be, and like, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. That's so true. I do think right now that it is human nature that people do want to help. They do want to support.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you have ideas or thoughts about, for the person who is okay, for a matter of months or whatever it might be, but they see that there are people in their community or close to their community who really need help? What are some of the things that you're seeing that people can do to help?
So I think there's some really wonderful groups, organizations, strategy, tactics and strategies that are looking at this. So, and people are, we're already starting to see commercials around this, and this is true. So if you're lucky enough, privileged, it does have to do with luck. If you're privileged enough to continue to have a job, continue to get your paycheck, I think it's super, super important that I'll back up or interrupt. So I believe that our money and our capital is a mechanism to support the communities that we are involved in, right? So I think it's really important. So little personal vulnerability. So about 90% of my cash flow just evaporated in a couple of days, a number of weeks ago, like many of us who are consultants and running consulting firms. And yet I'm saving money because I'm not going out I'm not going and having breakfast or lunch or dinner or drinks or whatever with clients, colleagues, friends, etc. So that bout of money. So Jasper, who you've met, so I take him to a doggy daycare place, and they're 100% of their business evaporated overnight. So I still take Jasper once a week to go play with the 2 dogs that they have that are their dogs. So it's tiny, right? It's just one day, as opposed to like I used to leave Jasper, doggy daycare for on the average, I don't know, like 9 days a month or something, because I'm doing trainings over the weekends and doing workshops. So to me, so that, like, how can I continue to play it forward in terms of support the local based businesses and enterprise who are now gone to zero? So whether that's buying gift cards to the local restaurants or the bakeries, the individual bakeries, or if you're privileged enough or you have a lifestyle that requires a house cleaner, pay for your house cleaner, even if they are not coming to your house, and recognize that you're paying for them now, and then they'll make it up past this, right? Because if your income is still the same, it's not changed, then how can you support? How can you contribute to the Support the Restaurants Fund? How can you support, support all the not-for-profits and social sector organizations that you thought about giving, or that you normally give, or you normally give at the end of the year? How can you give contributions to the amazing arts and culture organizations, like the museums, like theater companies? Write them a check, right? Because their livelihood has stopped in its tracks for the most part. I mean, some theater companies are doing innovations about, in terms of, they were lucky enough to record shows before the stay-at-home order came. But I think supporting cultural institutions, because those are often the ones, both cultural as well as social sector organizations, they're the ones who are considered quote unquote extra, and it's just the opposite, right? It's like those are so often the organizations and the institutions that make us a society, right? If you have individual friends who are artists, think about sending them a check, right? Just support those individuals and those organizations and institutions that enrich your lives and enrich the community collective. And nothing is too small.
Sorry, my printer was cranking away behind me, so I muted myself. I love what you're saying, because you're pointing out, first of all, there's people. There's very real, like, human beings that are impacted in different ways. And to be looking for them is one thing, but you're also pointing out how interconnected all this is.
Yes.
You know, that the artist or the house cleaner or the person who cuts your hair or whatever it might be.
Or the person who comes and cuts your grass every couple of
it's also interconnected. And it's also reminding me, like, the human mind is pretty remarkable. Like, if we're looking for these things, they're not that hard to find. Part of the problem is that I see right now is people are so wound up. They're so in, like, scarcity and fear. And if you're watching the news, there's all this stuff going on. We're not looking for those things. So I love that this conversation is opening up the possibility of, look, in your own community, it's right there.
Yeah,
it's right there.
And I think the thing that's also really important is for us to be mindful of what we're taking in. So really, I heard a great idea yesterday, which is, hold on. I heard the amazing idea about having a weekly tech Sabbath. So one day a week, actually do not go on Zoom, do not look at your phone, don't look at television, right? Because what's happening, and I'm definitely experiencing this, that my central nervous system is just like,
yes,
right? Because it's just the level, right? Just everything that we are having to integrate and pay attention to is just rocking. I mean, the cortisol is just killing us, right? I mean, literally.
Well, yeah, and you and I both had that experience today, because I reached out to you this morning to, just to reconfirm and make sure that we were on track and that I had sent the link and whatever. And you were very authentic with me, which you always are, about, well, if you want the real me today, kind of thing. And I said, me too. It was like it's overwhelming. And I love that idea. And I can just hear people saying, a whole day? Oh my God. Well, if you can't do a whole day, do a half a day. If you can't do a half a day, do a couple of hours, but give yourself a break for sure.
Right. So So, and I think the other thing that's related to that is, and I don't think I can imagine that there's a whole host of us that we find ourselves actually more busy than we were before. Because one of the things that I used to, have a 12-hour days, right? But in that 12-hour days, it was like, okay, well, I'm going to go to one meeting, but then I'm going to get in my car and drive to my another meeting. And then, so there was, in my life, there was a natural exhalation in between the packed busyness of my life. And now, with like the insanity of Zoom, well, not the intent, but the technological capacities of Zoom, whatever, like, like Friday, I was on 5 straight hours of Zoom calls, like straight. Cause it was like, oh, like 9:30 or 10:30, 10:45, boom, 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 boom. And what was, so the ability for us to be, how it's so important to be mindful about self-care. And I recognize that my experience, I'm single, so I don't have any, I don't have any children or a spouse to kind of break up that or have a different element of scheduling. Luckily, Jasper makes me, I have to take him out for a walk every day. Except when it's raining, which is like, oh, okay, all right, we got to work on that. I neglected to get him a raincoat. Right? He just has to get wet. But I think being so mindful about our scheduling and what are we, I posted these amazing 6 quarantine questions that was in a Greater Good magazine. And they're really, really some powerful questions that are very, very simple, but that relate to self-care. And I don't know if I can find it. Let me see if I can remember it. So it was like, who have you connected with today? Who have you checked in with, and who have you connected today? How have you moved your body? Might be something about what has inspired you. There were like six very, very basic but critical questions that relate, that keep us connected to ourselves, and again, and helps us in paying attention to our minds, body, and spirit. Because I know for me, it's super easy. Just like, oh, let me go on this Zoom call. Oh, let me go into this Zoom meeting. Oh, let me go into, and then by the end of the day, I'm so tired because I actually haven't used Zoom to connect with the people that actually feed me. In contrast to like the business, but like the range of responsibilities. So if I can encourage or invite folks, is to be sure that once a day we're doing something that is, whether it's like cooking ourselves an amazing meal, or be sure, I think that was one of the things, how have we connected with nature, right? Or how have we gone outside today? So I think that those things, and that's especially important given, I don't know what is happening in other people's lives, but they've closed the dog parks. They've closed those resources. At least the county government in the Bay Area have closed those resources. That is basically requiring us to just walk in our neighborhoods, which is great, but we have to find new ways of walking, because finding an off leash dog park is now impossible. So it's little things, and it's those little things that make a difference, right? Because now when you're talking about going to the grocery store, we have to look at what our risk, what level of risk we're being able to tolerate, or not even tolerate, but for, again, some people, if you have people in your home who have risk factors, like diabetes, like they have emphysema, or they have asthma, so you cannot go to the store because that's too big of a risk. So given that, the mindfulness that we have to have around taking care of ourselves and taking care of our loved ones is essential, and also is related to our resilience.
Yeah. Oh man, so much to talk to. I'm watching the clock. There is one other thing I definitely want to check in with you on, though, and we kind of were headed in this direction, and I brought us back. But we were talking about looking ahead and how much uncertainty there is. You were talking about, there's going to be some sort of a new normal, but we really don't know what that's going to be. And what I'm experiencing right now is that's creating some anxiety for me. Like I'm finding myself struggling with that, and I'm seeing a lot of other people, finding myself in a lot of conversations where that's really difficult for people. My work is all about having a vision. Now, also, you can't really have a vision because we don't know where we're going. What kinds of things are you doing to deal effectively with that uncertainty looking ahead?
I think Right. So that uncertainty is related to uncertainty of our external environment and our other environments, right? So, but there are things that are not uncertain, like what and we know this from conscious capitalism, right? Our values are, our values and our principles are consistent, right? Our how we our commitment to how we treat people is consistent. So the one thing that I invite people to do is to actually do some not only visioning work, but I think doing work or spending some time in meditation, spending some time with the people that you love and respect, and actually spend some time around values, around operating principles, around what we are called, what are we called to do. So and the reason I say that is because I've been really fortunate to be working with an amazing company called I Individual, which is actually a personal branding company. And they're brilliant at helping people think about purpose and our careers and our personal brand. And so some of the activities that we have been going through has been around values, principles, our calling, like what is our what's the big what's the big huge idea or challenge that we want to address. And so what I think is critical about this is in where all the external elements are in a complete state of disarray. So our being an inquiry around, like, what am I called to do? How do I want to have a difference? How do I want to have an impact? So even if the world is falling apart, I still have a sense about how do I want to make a difference, right? And so if I'm grounded in that, and if I'm grounded in spending time in what's my vision for, or having an understanding about who I am in this moment, and having an understanding about how with others that I respect and work with, and want to work with, that's not going to change. My values aren't going to change. My principles about wanting to really look and how do I create a more equitable world, right? Whether it's in my particular industry, et cetera, et cetera. So I think what is helping is if we get clear about what gifts we have, what are the skills and capacities and competencies that I have right now in this moment that I'm going to use, and that you're using those. So what's happening and how the world is changing, that is not going to change your the current skills and capacities and competencies that you have right now. And then you get to use them as the external context changes. So that's what we're being asked to do, like as consultants. Okay, our skills and competencies are pretty much the same, right? So
yes, and it allows us to step into that uncertainty with some sense of groundedness. Yeah. And I agree with you 100%. Now is the perfect time to go inside and in this moment get more clear about our values and about our skills, because the truth is the vision piece, it is uncertain right now. If you're like really trying to get a crystal clear vision of where you're going to be in 6 months, good luck with that, because we really don't know.
Good luck with that strategic plan.
But I love the reminder that who we are, the more clear we are about who we are will allow us to navigate through that uncertainty in so much more of a powerful way.
And not only who we are, but I think this also has ramifications who organizations are. So who are you as a business? Who are you as a not-for-profit organization. So you're answering those critical strategic questions about what are you doing, how are you, so maybe the how changes, but what are your values? Who are you as a business, as an entity? So if you answered that, what are your core competencies? What are your core products and services? If you have profound grounding in what the answers to those questions, that will connect the dots between, okay, so, and what are you doing now? And what might you be doing in 3 months? So, yeah. And I think it helps us in being less reactive and being much more facile, right? And being able to exert the pivots that we need.
Yep.
And wow. I'm sure that we're out of time, and so we should just have a part 2.
Well, we're gonna have to do it. We're gonna have to do a follow-up. No, I'm serious. I would love to do a follow-up in a couple of weeks, because again, things are changing really quickly. But it's such a perfect tie-in to, you talked about your branding, my whole branding around excellent decisions. And I think it's really clear in the coming weeks and coming months, we're all going to have really important decisions to make. And your reminder about getting grounded and getting really clear about our values and our value, those skills that we bring, it's a really good time to do that, because when those decisions come, there's also going to be a lot of stress and pressure, a lot of other people telling us, you should do this, you need to do that, you have to do this, blah, 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 blah. But if we're like really clear about our values, and that's what drives us, whatever the uncertainty is, like, thank you. We should have had this conversation this morning instead of waiting till the end of the day. Because it's very, like, it's energizing to me. Like, I can feel it in this moment, like there's hope emerging. Whereas this morning, I just felt like,
yes, exactly.
I just wasn't feeling it.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people are experiencing that. So everyone, rewind, play this again.
Yeah, in the morning.
And Diane and I promise to do a follow-up.
And I have to read this because given that we're talking about wisdom, and so one of the wisest stunning brilliant thought leaders is Toni Morrison, who we lost last year. And this is way before, I don't know, I mean, this quote is from years and years and years ago. But I think, let's think about it in this context of COVID-19. And she says, I know the world is bruised and bleeding. I'll say, and I'll add, and also physically isolating.
And having trouble breathing, yes.
Yes. And know it is important not to ignore its pain. It is also critical to refuse to succumb to its malevolence. Like failure, chaos, let me say this, like failure, chaos, should be in all caps, contains information that can lead to knowledge and even wisdom. This is precisely the time when artists, and fill in the blank, you could say when artists and activists and social entrepreneurs or just people go to work.
Yes.
Right? There is no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language, we create art. That is how civilizations heal. So we can talk about the silence part, because we do need meditative, contemplative silence. But I think the silence she was talking about is not having a voice.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. So we are out of time,
Great.
Sadly.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you so much for being willing to share your wisdom. I would love to do a follow-up. And, there's so much action that come out of this conversation, which is great. And it really does. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I just want to invite folks to be in conversation with each other and have the courageous conversations that we might previously not would have had.
And if people, I'm the king of the segue, watch this. If people want to be in conversation with you, how would they go about doing that? How can people reach out and connect with you and learn more about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, the easiest thing, because my website is under construction, because I finally am redoing it. So just find me on LinkedIn. So I'm Diane Johnson, MAPU, MMAPEU, Management Consulting. And that's a South African name that means woman who carries ideas. But you can just find Diane Johnson.
And I will put that, I'll put that in the podcast description as well.
Great. Fabulous. All right.
Woman who carries ideas. Perfect. So thank you again. You are exemplary when it comes to my vision of what I wanted to share in this wisdom series. So thank you so much for that. And thank you to our listeners for joining us for this episode of the Excellent Decisions podcast, where again, we're here to help you make more decisions based on your vision, your values, your value, rather than stress and pressure. So much stress and pressure these days, with the intention of accomplishing great things and achieving great things, which is great, but also being truly happy. We use the ancient Greek definition of happiness, which is the experience of joy while in pursuit of your potential. And I think you can tell that Diane lives by that and works to help people create that same experience as well. So thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Excellent Decisions podcast.